Hey folks, Ryan Walker with OSA Guides and Outfitters, and as promised, here is my intro to sink line basics. Oh, behind it, let it go.
Yep.
He's got it.
Yeah, dude, what an eat.
Hey, we're back, folks. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoy these little tips and tactics videos we're going to start doing, plus the fly tying videos. We sure love doing them for you. And I would be remiss if I didn't do a little advertising. If you are even considering a walleye trip this late winter, early spring, say in February and March, you need to get booked because we are filling up fast. We're about 2/3 full right now. I'll make sure everybody has a link to get that done. Spring smallmouth is the same way. I generally kick that off about mid-March, and we are filling up really quick. And I've got a few select dates open in May and April, and we're booking full on into June right now. So if you are even considering coming back or becoming a first-time client, come see us and hit the link that's going to be in the comments on this video. Anyway, here we go. Sink tip basics. I'm going to start this off with a little disclaimer. I am not the end-all be-all on sink tip authority. Your mileage is going to vary based on where you fish, what you're fishing for, and what flies you're fishing, etc., so on. I'm going to delve into specifically the lines that I use most frequently on the waters that I guide on here in the Ozarks of Southwest Missouri and Northwest Arkansas. So take what I say, apply it to that, and apply it to how you fish and where you fish. And if you're going to blast me on some things, just throw it in the comments and let's discuss it, because again, your mileage is going to vary based on what you're doing. So here we go. On to sink tips and sinking lines. So let's first talk about what the difference is between a sinking line and a sink tip. A sinking line is just that, just like it sounds. It is a line that sinks at a rate determined by the weight of the line for the length of the line. So, i.e., if you buy a 330 grain full sinking line, it's going to be 330 grains the entire length of the line. On the other hand, a sink tip line is an application-specific line that has a section, or I should say a forward section of that line that is at the sink tip rate that you buy. So, in other words, a sink 6 on a 15-foot tip. So that is a sinking tip. You've got the tip and then the belly of the line or the body of the line that is usually going to be a floating line, unless you get into hover style lines, which we will go into. Kind of the difference. A full sinking line is more of, they're used in rivers quite a bit. But for me, their application is more of a lake application, or on river, deep, high, fast water, where you've got to get that fly down. You got to get it down in a hurry, and it's got to go deep. Sinking tips are more application specific, like I said, and give you a little bit more versatility depending on what flies you're fishing and what flies and what water you're fishing those flies in. First thing you want to know, always going forward, know your water. Know the species of fish that you're going to, know their habits, know where they live for the time of the year that you're going to be fishing to them, and then you can match those lines to what you're trying to do. I'm going to run through real quick what I carry with me, why I carry them, and then we'll get into some of the more nuanced stuff like leaders, etc., so on. So, first off and foremost, I carry with me a pretty good selection of sink tip lines. I generally have 4 or 5 with me on the boat at any one time. Again, these are lines that I use, in my guiding career. I'm on the water 250, 300 days a year. Most of that, 200 of it probably spent chasing warm water fish, specifically smallmouth. And a lot of that's spent in the summertime on low water. And that's really what we're going to dive into here the most, is what line you need from, say, when the rains end in June through the middle part of fall when the rains come in and we've got those low water situations. So let me run real quick through what I carry with me at all times. And I'm sorry I don't have any of the boxes for these, but I'll put links up to them in the video. I've got two of these reels. This is a TFO BBK SD, or this isn't an SD, it's a regular BBK, but it has a Rio outbound short full intermediate on it. This is a full intermediate sinking line. So the first 17 feet of this line are an intermediate line that sinks 2 to 3 inches per second. The second lines that I carry with me at all times, again, on this rod, is a streamer tip from Rio. It's this is a 6 IPS, so 6 inches per second. I carry the same line in a 4, so it's 4 inches per second. And I also, and honestly on low water, this is probably one of my favorite lines. I carry some sort of a hover line. So this is a Rio Predator, and this is a hover 1-2. So in other words, what is hover? Hover is a line, a sink tip line that has a shorter front end section in varying sink rates. So in other words, this would be a weight forward 7 floating for the belly, for the body of the line, and then it goes to sink 2, and the front section is sink 1. The premise with hover lines being that you get a little bit more pinpoint control in managing the depth and maintaining that depth of the target area that you're trying to fish. And last but not least, and the only non-Rio line that I really carry with me on any, on almost every trip, is this Ghost Tip 5. So this is a Cortland Ghost Tip 5. It's a 5-foot intermediate, 2 inches per second, and it is probably one of my favorite super low water lines when I'm fishing unweighted swim flies in skinny water. So why do I carry each of these lines with me? That's what we're really trying to get around to here. Why am I fishing what line I'm fishing when I'm fishing it? 95% of the time in the summertime, I am fishing swim flies. So I'm fishing unweighted flies that I need to get to a certain depth, and I want them to react a certain way. And I'm going to try to match the line I'm fishing with the water and the fly that I'm fishing and the presentation that I want to give. So by unweighted hover flies, I'm talking about flies like the yard sail, for instance, or double deceiver. Big flies that I want to impart a certain action on. So, and you've heard me talk about this before. I think the most important thing on any of these bigger hover fly or swim flies that we fish are what happens when you pause that fly. What happens when that fly stops? The action when they're, when you're burning them across the water is great. But when these fish get a little more persnickety and they want to examine a fly, what does that fly do when it stops? Does it stop and maintain altitude? Does it kick? And will it hover effectively to give that fish the time to make the decision on whether he's going to take it or not? And your sink line, your choice of a sink line for these types of flies is very important. So we're going to kind of walk through them once here real quick. So these intermediate lines, a full intermediate line like the outbound short, I'm fishing that. It's probably one of my go-to lines throughout the summer. I've always got a rod with a full intermediate on. That's for that 2 to 4 foot water range. So I'm wanting to fish it in skinnier water, and I want to be able to maintain my depth. It's somewhere between a foot under the surface to 2 feet under the surface. And again, when that line stops, what does my fly do? Does it stop with it? Does it pause? Does it hover? Does it kick? Does it do all the things that I want it to do? Intermediate lines are great for fishing skinny water in the summer. These bigger lines, let's say like this Type 6 15-foot streamer tip from Rio, I'm going to keep one of those close handy. If it's not rigged on the rod, it's going to be on a spool somewhere in the boat, probably in my box. And if you're like me, on a lot of the rivers you fish, it's going to be a whole lot of skinny water and then a riffle and then a plunge pool. And we're going to stop if we've got a 6 or an 8 foot deep plunge pool, or what I call holes in the river, where you're going along and it's skinny and all of a sudden you've got a Dollar General sized hole that's 8 or 9 feet deep, I'm going to switch over to one of these, either the Sink 4 or the Sink 6 in that streamer tip, just so I can get the fly down into the depths, especially in the summertime when the sun's up and those fish have dropped a little bit more into the water column. They're a little bit deeper, closer to the bottom. The hover line, I would say between this and that ghost tip are the two lines I use the most in skinny water. I love these hover lines for unweighted swim flies because there's a straight line from the floating section to the fly. There's no belly, there's no sag. The only sag you're going to get in it, or the only bend you're going to get in it, is whatever the current does. But it maintains a very constant depth. And I really believe that these lighter hover lines in the summertime made a huge difference on our success rates, because we were able to get into skinny water, take unweighted flies, keep them off of the bottom, and they still impart the action that we want to do on those unweighted flies. Again, pause, hover, kick. Will it stop? Will it maintain altitude and attitude? And when it stops, does it kick? That kick to me on any of these articulated swim flies is key. And you just can't get the same control fishing an unweighted fly on a floating line. I'm not saying it can't be done, because people do it all the time, but maintaining a depth is what we're trying to do. We are trying to maintain a target depth. That's the reason I carry these 4 or 5 lines. And you can really get off into the weeds with sink tips, but if you'll carry 4 or 5 with you like I do, or even 2 or 3, if somebody said you can only carry 3 lines with you, it would be that full intermediate, then it would be the hover, and then probably this ghost tip 5. That 5-foot ghost tip from Cortland is one of my favorite lines on the planet. So let's talk a little bit about leader selection. And this is another place you can really get off into the weeds if you wanted to. Leader selection for sink tips is super, super simple. And let me see if I've got one rigged up here. So if you look, I don't know how easily that is to see, but I've got about 2 feet, maybe 30 inches of a butt section. So you can use whatever you like. This happens to be a commercial leader that I've cut down just to get the butt section. I've gone to a small swivel, and then from there I can vary my length of the tippet that I'm using off the end of that. We're fishing for aggressive predatory fish that generally are not leader shy or line shy. So length is not as big of an issue. In fact, a longer leader can become a liability, because you end up with the fly way above where the sink tip is, and then you're pulling down through. The shorter the leader is, especially on those hover lines, the shorter you can make your leader and still make it effective, the better. The more positive you're going to have between the end of that sink tip line and where the fly is. Instead of having this, you end up with this. That's where you get that action. That sink tip is a foot below the fly is going to dive. Not saying that's always bad, but I would much rather, if I know I'm fishing a target depth of 2 to 4 feet, I want that fly pulling straight through the water. That's also going to affect the action of the fly if your line is pulling it down through. So if I had to sum this up succinctly, in the summer, in low water, again, I'm going to carry 3 different sink lines with me. And I carry a floating line, but I use it only for top water. And the rest of the time, I have either got a hover line, a full intermediate, or one of these little short ghost tip intermediates. And I'm not paid by anybody except my clients. My favorite line in the summer, hands down, if I had to rank them in order, would be this Rio Predator. And this is a weight forward 7 hover one. So for what it's worth, that's what I carry. That's why I fish them. You can make it as easy or as complex as you want. Find 2 or 3 lines that you really like. You're going to see increased success on the river, especially fishing these bigger or not even smaller swim flies that are unweighted. You're going to be able to maintain control, get that fly tag, get the action that you want it to have, and hopefully hook up on some more fish. So that's it. Short and sweet, very basic. We'll go off into the weeds at some point on some more of these lines, but for right now, you know, learn your lines, know your water, know what you're going to fish. Carry 2 or 3 crucial and critical lines with you that you'll use at all times, and you'll see your success rates go up. Hey, I hope you enjoy these things. I really do. Again, I have no ego in this whatsoever. So if you disagree with anything that I say, or if you have critiques, or if you have anything you want to say that will add value to these things going forward, please put those in the comments, man, because again, I don't know everything. I learn something every single time I'm on the water, and I learn something from every single client that I fish with. And I'd love to learn something from you guys. So come fish with us. Link to the websites in the comments. We'll see you soon. Ryan Walker, OSA Guides and Outfitters. Free the Fighter.